life and confidence coach Diana Leader, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Roadshow. You are listening to another interview with the men of the men's book, and today my guest is David McLeod. You'll find David's full bio in the show notes. Hey everybody, thank you for your patience. So, does anyone actually reach transcendence, do you think, or is it an upward moving target? Let's see what my guest today thinks about that. I'm Diana Leader, host of the Crave More Life Roadshow podcast. I'm an intuitive life coach and a life hack who helps you get what you want when you find your voice. I'm also the proud lead author of the Find Your Voice, Save Your Life book series, including the award-winning Powerful Healer Spiritual Stories, and the men's book that we've been patiently waiting for, Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 4, Transcendent Men Real Stories. We're publishing this book within a week of doing this recording, so if you're listening and it's around the first week of August or after, then you should be able to find it. You will be able to find it on Amazon. So I can't wait to see the impact of this book. I think it's going to be amazing. David McLeod is my guest today, and I'm happy to be talking with him about his chapter in Find Your Voice, Save Your Life 4, and he has titled his chapter, The Sacred Carpet, On-Ramp to a Path of Transcendence. David is a fighter pilot, best-selling author, software engineer, aerobics instructor, poet, lifeguard, musician, radio host, teacher, photographer, ordained minister, and yogi. Now I need to take a breath. That's a lot of experience which David brings to bear in his capacity as a transformational speaker, life mastery coach, experiential facilitator, and writer storyteller. As a certified master life coach, David shares his wisdom, insights, personal lessons, and expertise in countless ways that help people all over the world to become true masters of their lives. So welcome to the Roadshow, David. I'm honored to have you here, and I'm very honored that you're in this book, and can't wait to start the conversation about it.
Well, thank you for that, Diana. I appreciate your invitation, and I appreciate being here. Just one little point of clarity, that list of titles and roles are things I have done in the past. Some of them I'm still doing. I'm not a fighter pilot anymore. That was in my previous life when I was just a 25-something-year-old guy. Now I'm nearly 70, so that's a long time to go. And the same thing with the radio DJ. I did that when I was a teenager, believe it or not. But the reason I list those is because what I have learned in my process of coaching people is when I ask someone, who are you? Often the first thing they say is, well, I'm David, or I'm Diana, or whatever. They say their name. And I say, thank you. Now, who are you? Once they get the idea that I'm not really interested in their name, then comes the list of all the things I do. I'm a fighter pilot. I'm a poet, and all these things that I have done in the past. And eventually people realize, wait a minute, that's not really who I am. Those are just things I do or I have done as an expression of who I am. So what is this I am underneath that really is expressing all this stuff? And that's where the real magic comes in. And that's what I really like to coach people about, is learning who they really are, why they are here. Those are the two key questions that everybody asks. And believe it or not, there actually are answers for these questions. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of this book. I remember when we first started talking about it, Scott started asking questions. He created these groups and he was asking questions, and we're talking about the title of the book, and somewhere along the way the word transcendent men came up, and I could feel my butt puckering. And I heard that. I said, wait a minute, I'm not a transcendent man. What the hell are you guys talking about? So but I decided to embrace the concept and figure out what this really means to me, you know? And so I think that's how I approached my writing. And it took me a while. It took me several months before I was able to get to the nitty gritty of what I wanted to say about transcendence.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So first I want to go back to your comment about, the coaching and the list and the whole bit. That's, I appreciate that. I kind of come from the same place. You are not what you do. You're not just your name, or you're not your last name, whatever it may be. So yeah, I really do appreciate that. That makes a huge difference. And, getting to know who you are is amazing. What I really liked about your list was that it gave me an essence. I've known you now for several months, but I really don't know you that well. So that gave me just a wee essence of the kinds of things that, for whatever reason, you have jumped into over the years. So I found it really, really interesting. So for whatever that's worth.
Well, thank you. And, I'll bet you every single person on the planet, certainly everybody watching this, can come up with a similar list of all the things they've done in their lives. And just what I like to do when I recommend this to my clients is try to come down to one word or two words to describe that thing rather than a whole paragraph, because when you can get it down to one or two words, then it's easy to remember and it's easy to say, and people can get an image for themselves of what that means. So when I say fighter pilot, I don't know what you're thinking. I know what I'm thinking, but you have your own idea of what a fighter pilot is. Same thing with poet. Those words have meaning to each of us, and it's not going to be exactly the same meaning, although there are probably some overlap. So that's the beauty of doing a little exercise like that, is just write down the list of all the things you've done in your life and narrow it down and try to create it as a role name. Have you ever watched the credits on movies? Sometimes they'll have the name of a name of an actor and the role he played, and the role would be cowboy number 1, cowboy number 2. Now you might not in your mind remember which cowboy was which, but oh, those two guys were playing the cowboys. I remember that scene now because they didn't give them names because, there was no dialogue involving their names. But you see, that's the point. If you can reduce your list down to the individual, a word to describe what it is you do as a noun, you're going to have a great list. And you're going to be able to look at that and say, wow, I have done a lot in my life.
Yeah, right on. Right on. I love that. Okay, so let's get to transcendence. And I know we have...
That's right. We were here for a purpose.
We were here for that, yeah. So, and I know between the conversations that we've all had in the open mics and whatnot in the group, and I think I've said on there, I ask everybody what their definition is because it's so different. Everyone's is so different. And that makes a lot of sense. It might be a little disappointing, maybe even a little boring if everybody had the same one. So I have heard you talk about it, but tell us again, the listeners.
Well, my actual definition of transcendence may have changed a little bit, because I remember we had a call a while back and I heard some of the men talking about their perspectives, and I said, yeah, that resonates for me. Today, I guess my definition is it joins the word trans, which means across or over, I guess, and ascendance, which means to climb. So it's got this sense of arising, right? And to me, that arising part has to do with elevating consciousness, raising awareness, becoming more in tune and in alignment with who I really am. And in that sense, I do believe I have achieved some level of transcendence, but I know I'm nowhere near finished. And so to me, it's a process. It's a continuum, if you like. And by the way, just because I'm in this process of ascendance across and over these obstacles and so forth, that doesn't mean I don't hit these little pockets where I may, do a little bit of backsliding.
For sure.
I'm a human being. We're all human beings. And sometimes my ego mind gets the best of me, and, then I look back and I say, yeah, I don't really like the way I was showing up there. It's a reminder that I want to continue on the ascendance trajectory rather than, going down the rabbit hole, so to speak.
Right, right. So, relative to that, tell us about your chapter.
Well, so as I was mentioning earlier, we've had a long time together, which is, I've done, as you can see over here, my shoulder, I've got several books that I've been a collaborative author on. And when I did those ones also were with Laura DeFranco, by the way. And so we had a very short time window to get them written, like I think 2 months or something. And ours has been a leisurely journey of what, 4 months or something like that. It's like way more time than I need. So I've been totally relaxed and kind of sliding into it. But I also noticed that as we're talking about the topic and having our open mic discussions, I was still struggling, saying, well, what the hell am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? I mean, I've told this story, I've told that story, I've done this. Do I want to repeat stuff? And then I just started thinking about this whole notion of transcendence and what it really means. And I said, it's a kind of a journey. It's an ongoing process. So I thought about that and I said, well, what if I start at the beginning of the journey and pick a few highlights, along the journey that show my trajectory. And so that's what I ended up doing. I ended up writing 4 little vignettes, if you like, describing events in my life that kind of led to certain decisions, led to certain behaviors, and even brought me to the point of despair in my life, where I realized I'm not the happy person that everybody told me I was going to be if I followed all their rules and regulations and guidelines and checklists.
Right.
And so that was really where things started to happen. And so the reason I call it the sacred carpet is because the biggest, most powerful turning point in my life was an event that I did with an organization called the Mankind Project. And this was it was called the New Warrior Training Adventure. And it was a very, very intense 48-hour, slightly longer experience where we ended up doing some work on a carpet. And I'll tell you, when you look at this carpet, it's just this grungy, old, dank looking piece of fabric that has gone through so many wartime scenarios. Well, wartime, not really, but intense scenarios that it's kind of frayed at the edges, it's falling apart. But as I describe in my book, the facilitator had so much reverence for this carpet and what it represented, not what it was, but what it represented. Mm-hmm. And so we all of us who are participating, well, I can't speak for them, but I could see in their eyes and in their behaviors that the men were taking on this sense of reverence, and they were doing very, very deep work. And so for me, it was a case of unleashing some pent-up rage that had been inside me for a very long time. I mean, some of it had leaked out at different times in my life, but it was like an explosion. It was like a volcano where all this stuff came out under a very controlled circumstance. And once that happened, once all of that anger and rage came out, what came out underneath that was deep, deep, painful sorrow. That's the only way I can describe it. And it was just the most intense experience I've ever had in my life. I can't think of any better words to describe it than that. But what happened was, after that kind of abated, it was like a tsunami, I guess, of tears and gunk and snot and everything coming out of my head. And once that abated, all of a sudden I felt this amazing, beautiful blue gold light filling up my body. Mm. Again, the words just simply don't describe it. I do my best with the words that come to mind as I remember the visualization. And it was warm, it was loving, it was connecting, it was compassionate. It was just like, wow, this is amazing. And as I was looking out around me, all the other men, everybody I could see, they all had these beautiful auras on them. You know, something that I'd never noticed before. So in that moment, I realized, whoa, my life is not ever going to be the same. This is going to be, things are going to be different from now on. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had to make a choice about how I had been showing up before and spending a lot of my time trying to live up to other people's expectations and fit into the mold that society was creating for me. And I said, I am not going to do that anymore unless it is in alignment with who I am. I'm not going to do anything anymore strictly to please other people or to make them happy or to avoid triggering them or, whatever. From now on, I am just going to be who I am. And if people don't like it, that's okay. That's their business. So that's really what the chapter is about. And I probably talked about it much longer than it takes to read it.
Well, that's okay. You can't put everything in one chapter. Wow. You know what? That's a great kind of progression that you've described. And a lot of the guys, of course, have talked about, and so you really are no different where this is concerned, of course, that opportunity to dance with that shadow as we have depicted. Thank you very much, Guy Gilchrist. The dance and the meeting of the shadow and whatever's kind of holding us back, men or women. We have to, if we're going to heal, that's where we have to go. And so for you to have done that and had that, it's pretty cool that you actually had that visual. You had the feeling, and then you had that visual as well of others around you and their auras, as a confirmation. Not everybody gets that, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. And to know, that to me perhaps was that first ladder of transcendence, and I'm sure that things have changed for you since then.
Oh yeah, that was the major turning point of my life, really. It wasn't the first wake-up call, if you like. I'd had some other things happen in my life, and I talk about those in my chapter as well. But there were events that happened that made me wake up to the fact that I had this underlying anger and resentment that I didn't really know where it came from. At that point in time, I had been living most of my life in an unconscious way, just doing what everybody said I was supposed to do, and not really paying attention to what was true for me. And as a consequence, I essentially abdicated my own sovereignty. I gave myself up, right? And that's what was causing the resentment and anger and everything else, especially if I would come into contact with someone who appeared to be more in tune with his or her alignment, his or her sovereignty. When I would run into those people like that, that's when I would have these questions. Well, how come I can't be like that? How come I can't do that? Why is it that I have to do it this way? It just seemed unfair. So that's where part of the resentment was coming from. Anyway, what's interesting about all this is after I had done that work, and that was, by the way, that was 2003 that I did that carpet training. After I had done that, it took a couple more years to really kind of understand how I'd gotten to that place. And I would say by the time I was 55 years old, that's when I finally realized that way back, 52 years earlier, when I was 3 years old, my mom had started the process with those 8 words that she said to me. I know you better than you know yourself. And that's where, now I put this into the book in chronological order, but I didn't understand it mentally. I didn't understand that timeline until many years later. So that's often the case for people who are doing personal growth work. You might say, here I am today, and I really don't understand why this has happened, what's going on over here, what this is all about, and so on. And I really want to understand it. And I say, yeah, understanding is good, but it's more important to heal first. So if you can find a way to get in touch with, as you say, the shadow parts of yourself, start to bring those to the fore, uncover the beauty and the magnificence and the gold that are buried within those parts, and start to really embrace it and heal it and integrate it back into yourself, then you will begin to understand the timeline.
Right.
And that's what I see as the process now for people.
That's really interesting because a lot of people can connect to a childhood incident and know that that is something that they still carry with them in some way, shape, or form. And intellectually, I think we can understand, okay, so if I was abused as a child, I'm not going to walk away from that being whole. I'm feeling like I'm whole. We are whole, but we don't always carry that. So to take that time out to do the healing that comes from that, I think is it's a must. I don't think that we grow without that.
Right.
Appreciate you.
I have. I think as a result of what happened to me in that weekend, I discovered this is what I want to do with other people. I want to help people find out the truth about who they are. That's what I want to do. It was clear as a bell. I had no idea how to do it. So I just started learning everything I could learn about shadow work and facilitation and all this kind of stuff. And what I have discovered is, well, all of us have events that have occurred in our lives that influence the way we behave today. Some of them were good events, some of them were not so good. And we also may have suffered, some of us have suffered some extreme abuse and trauma and all kinds of other horrible things. And of course, in healing, you don't necessarily want to have to relive that trauma, but you certainly need to address it. And so part of what I learned was techniques on how to see yourself involved in that without being involved in it. And that's kind of, you talk about this inner child work or whatever. It's similar to that. But when I do a regression with somebody, I just say something like, why don't you just think back to the very first time that you can remember this feeling in your body? And they might go back to the age of 10, let's say. And 10 might not have been the first time, but this is the time that they feel safe enough to say, I can remember it then. And so what happens is we do a little work on that. We come to some healing in that area. And then maybe the next time we come back together, that person might experience another kind of energy. It might be related, it might be similar, and might choose to go a little bit further back in time. And eventually we'll get, I've even had people go back prior to their birth into a previous life. So it's really a question of, what do you want to learn about yourself? Are you willing to trust that you can see yourself in these unpleasant situations without actually being in the unpleasant situation? And you now, as the observer, can tell me exactly what that child needs in order to heal, in order to be supported. What kind of love, what kind of connection, what kind of healing. That's the beauty of this kind of work. And it can be scary for people because, as you say, nobody wants to go back and relive that stuff.
Yeah. And that would keep a lot of people away, right?
That's right.
Just that. So I really appreciate you sharing that because, they're going to be saying there's no way in hell I'm going there.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. You see, when you say there's no way in hell I'm going back there, what you really do is you condemn yourself to more hell going forward. Because the truth is, when you refuse to acknowledge your own shadows and parts of yourself that you've hidden or repressed or denied because you were trying to protect yourself from something, what you fail to acknowledge is, I'm still feeling that pain anyway. Even though it might not be showing up in exactly the same way, I'm still feeling it. The pain of separation, the pain of being alone, all these things. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking this crazy, wild detour direction.
Hey, you know what? That's what we do on this show. So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that is also the process of not using one's voice. You think that you're not using your voice because you're protecting yourself when actually you're just piling up the misalignment again and again and again.
Yep.
And that's the work that I do is the same kind of stuff. We're talking, alignment to self, because I think that's our truth.
Well, how many people do you know who will say these words? I'm defective, I'm broken, uh, because I was abused, I must have deserved it. Because this happened, I must have asked for it. How many people try to take it on as their responsibility, as it, not so much responsibility, as their fault, as if they created the situation? To me, it's like we're getting close to the 100% mark.
Yeah, you're right.
Most people say, well, it was my own fault. I asked for it. I dressed the wrong way. And whenever I hear that, I could just feel myself getting, I just want to go and bash somebody when I hear that. But I have to kind of calm myself and say, all right, I understand how you feel about it. I understand the thoughts that you have in your head about it. But what's the real truth here? What is the real truth here? How old were you when that happened? You were 4? You were 5? Well, how much responsibility do you have to take for someone else's actions when you're 4 or 5 years old?
Absolutely. Yeah. James was on just before you, and he and I were talking about the parental responsibility, raising kids and the kind of messages that we get from parents as well as everybody else. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a heavy load, but it's well worth it to have a kid that's supported and loved.
That's
and then grow up to be a kid who's an adult who is supported and loved. Yeah. That's
right. Well, and the other thing is, I had this absolute brilliant thought come to my mind, and it's just gone right out of my head again. See, a lot of people identify with their wound. And again, it's like saying, I'm a fighter pilot, or I am an alcoholic, or I am a child abuse sufferer or victim or whatever. Mm-hmm. When you put yourself in the role of I am, you are kind of limiting your capabilities and what you can do about it. When instead you say, I struggle with alcohol, I have had this experience of being abused, I have had this or that. Now you can look at it from a different perspective and say, all right, that was the experience that happened. What can I do about it today? And the other thing that happens is we have to understand too that most people are not severely abused. Most people are not traumatized as kids, but we're all conditioned. Every single one of us. All of us get the messages from our parents about how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to show up, what kind of actions we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And we're given boundaries and all kinds of stuff. And every one of those effects creates a belief system within us. And that belief system then becomes what we live with for the rest of our lives. If we can recognize that almost every parent on the planet just did the best that he or she could do, given the tools that he or she had at the time, we can then maybe come to a place of forgiveness and then develop a little bit of compassion for them. And then we can carry that forward and pay it forward in our lives.
Right.
It's important.
It's really important.
Personal growth work, it isn't optional, it's mandatory.
Yeah, I agree. So tell us how your actual behavior changed when you, even those first steps of transcendence. What actually changed for you in terms of how you lived your life?
Well, I think that one of the most obvious changes that occurred was I started being more compassionate towards people. Prior to that, I was kind of impatient. Some people would say I didn't suffer fools gladly. I
haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah. I still have that energy within me where I kind of ask myself, are you serious? You're really going to do that kind of thing? But I don't necessarily blurt it out anymore. Right. Now I kind of recognize that people are just where they are. They're doing what they can do. Most of them, I think most people are just trying to do the best they can. Mm-hmm. The number of truly evil people in this world is vanishingly small. I think most people are actually very, very decent at heart. And so I'm able to see that a lot more than I was able to see it before. And because of that, I'm becoming more forgiving, more loving, more connecting. I have a higher level of awareness and acceptance about things. I do my own work. I try to stay in alignment with my purpose for being now. Shadow work is the deepest and most beautiful work I think is possible. And so I really love doing that. I believe that if we can all do our shadow work, what it does is, first of all, it helps us to heal our own wounds. But secondly, it makes it possible for us to enter relationships in a much more intentional way.
Right.
So
Right.
I think, I don't know, at the moment, as it happens, I am living the life of a single man. I made that choice in 2006 when I got divorced, and I said, you know, maybe marriage is not for me. I'm open to the possibility, but I think it's going to take someone of the right kind of energy for me to connect with, someone who resonates with my view of the world, someone who has a similar mindset and a similar desire to raise consciousness in the world. Yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's what's coming up to mind right now.
You know what? So what that is saying to me is that, you know, what transcendence, and definitely in quotes, because this is healing behavior. This is, you know, this is healed behavior, you know, is what we're talking about. So when you think about it, all the, you know, we're always in relationships. So whether it's, you know, a significant other, did you hear that? Significant other, or friends or neighbors or whatever it is, or the community at large, you know, it doesn't really matter. We're always in relationships. So what I like about what you said is that you know, you talked about being more compassionate. So, you know, when you think about compassion and that plays itself out in relationships, that can only be a positive. So, you know, if before that, and I'm sure this wasn't the case, but who knows? I mean, before that, if you were the guy that wanted to, you know, punch somebody in the face and go and did it, you know, that would be a significant change. And I have to say that while I'm not sure that any of the guys in the book were that guy before, maybe, I'm not sure. That's the piece that I think is really, really valuable, is what, you know, when you're doing the work that you're doing, when you're just in relationship with people, whoever it is, you show up in a very different way, in a very positive, loving way, which I think is the beauty of the whole book, frankly.
Right, right. Well, I think that there's a couple of other behavioral changes that I've noticed. My communication style is very different now. I tend to be very direct most of the time, and I'll speak what I believe is my truth. And I know that before I did this work, sometimes my direct statements could be kind of painful for people to hear. So I have learned how to moderate that language in a way that I make it only about me, so that when I share something with you that I feel is something I really want you to hear, not that you need to hear it, I don't know if you need to hear it or not, but something that I am called to share with you, then I share it from the perspective of my heart, my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts. It's all about me anyway, really. You know,
Yes, for each of us. Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
I mean, think about what coaching is all about. When you are coaching someone, well, this is the way I think coaching should be. My objective in coaching is not to tell you what to do, but rather to share with you what I see and what I am understanding, so that you can then make a choice about whether you want to continue doing that or want to do something different. Yeah. That's kind of how I approach it. To me, it's all about facilitating someone else to become more aware of their own situation. Mm-hmm. See? Mm-hmm. It's kind of, I like to think of myself as a Sherpa, you know? I know the basic terrain of this mountain. but I don't know what path you're going to take or how you're going to traverse this. I can teach you the skills for different kinds of terrain. Then you can decide how you want to go. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. 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 And you know what? That really is the path to transcendence, right? You learn, as we talked about, you learn about what's, how you've been living your life in that particular moment. You make choices to change that because they're not aligned with who you are, and you move forward with those changes and those new behaviors. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree. That's my take on coaching too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I guess if you're like an athletic coach or something, it might be different. I'm watching you run and you're trying to go faster or something, and I can see that you're moving your legs in a certain way that are slowing you down. So I might say, well, if you try this, maybe you'll find yourself moving faster. It's kind of similar, but you can tell people, no, kick those legs up. Otherwise, you're dragging yourself. I don't even know what I'm talking about as far as this goes, but you get my point.
Mm-hmm. I do.
I do.
Yeah, they have the opportunity to be more direct.
That's right.
Yes, for sure. But I completely agree that, for me, I just like to put out, an array, and having intuitive hits in the middle of that. That's really important for me. I'm getting that to share. So I say, this is what it is. I share it, and it's yours to do with as you choose. Yeah, because if we're not...
I'm glad you mentioned intuition, by the way, because that is something else that shifted for me. And I wish I had mentioned this myself, but thank you for reminding me. Prior to all of that work, I was very much in my head, very much left brain, very much logical oriented, very, very rational, very scientific in approach. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem was there was no balance on the right side of my brain. And so a lot of this work helped me to become more in balance with my right brain, and thus allow my intuition to start working more for me. Or rather, it's always been working for me, but paying more attention to it, I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what, I think that comes from that self-alignment. The more aligned we are to our true selves, the more open we are, I think, to whatever our intuition is bringing us. Yeah, I love that. I think it's a powerful, powerful self-improvement tool, if nothing else. Yeah.
Well, for men, intuition sounds like a feminine thing. So a lot of men resist it because, hey, I can't be a man and be intuitive at the same time. And of course, that's completely wrong. You can be a man and be very compassionate, very loving, very intuitive.
Very vulnerable, as we've seen
and
with this book.
vulnerable and all the rest of it. Yeah. So these are beautiful aspects of all humanity. And when we see them in another human being, those are the people we tend to be attracted to. We, not necessarily in a sexual way at all. I mean, I'm just talking about, those are the people I want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And so men, if you're listening to this, you can go ahead and continue being the macho guy if you want to. But I encourage you to consider the possibility that maybe you're shutting out some of your best qualities by not allowing them to just be. You got to learn to trust your feelings. You got to learn to understand where they're coming from, what they're doing. And the more you can do that, the more you can be willing to talk about it and share it, the more you become accessible to other people.
Yeah. Other people, and I'm going to take it back again, and to themselves.
Yes.
It's just so, it's so incredibly powerful. Yeah. I love it. So I was going to ask you, actually, before you said that, and I think you just answered this one. I was going to ask you what your best piece of advice would be for a man who wants to grow. You've given me actually several points already, which is awesome. But if you have any more.
Well, I think we need to, first of all, I don't think that the feminist man is the right answer. That's really a true statement for me. This is not to say that you shouldn't be gentle and loving and kind and compassionate and all the rest of it, but you can be a strong, powerful man and be compassionate and loving and open and vulnerable at the same time. It is possible. You know, it is the masculine energy that wants to protect and defend the women and the children of the community. And that's a beautiful thing. I love to see that. So I want men to continue to hold that energy for sure. But at the same time, we need to tone down the intensity of anger and violence and everything else that's in the world. And I mean, we can't change the world until we work on ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the more men there are who are willing to do that work and who are willing to dive into the deep end, to look at their dark side, to look at their shadows, to heal all those wounds of childhood, the more men there are willing to do that, the more men there will be who have this quality of love, compassion, forgiveness, gentleness, and can still stand their ground when they need to.
Yes, yes. Which is also something that I think that women need to do as well. So I'm glad that you're talking about having that marriage of the two in any, you know, in the guys. Right. And yeah, because I think we need all of it. We definitely do. And I think that all of it, that is a feminist man, only because he then will be strong enough to be able to write some of the more political or, you know, other situations or other policies or whatever that have not been okay for men or women, right? So I love that. I think I think doing your healing is leadership.
Yeah, you know, I've led groups, men's groups, and also mixed gender groups, and both of them are absolutely amazing. I love doing them. Watching men and women work together it's really amazing. Mm-hmm. But I also noticed that men and women are different. Like it or not, we are different. And men approach things a certain way and try to, you know, deal with issues in a certain way. And women, they have their way of doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, the beauty of having these mixed gender groups was that we got to see each other in action, especially when we're doing our deep work. And noticing that there was a different approach for women, that men would not necessarily use that same approach to deal with their issues. And it was beautiful to watch. I'm not going to go into details because, you know, we just don't have the time, but it was something that really helped me to understand more about the amazing diversity that just exists in the masculine feminine world. Mm-hmm. It's really spectacular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can appreciate that. Yeah, and a really good point, because we're really not, we are different in terms of how we function.
That's right.
Yeah, I love it.
And it's not that one is better than the other or worse than the other. It has nothing to do with that at all. Mm-hmm. It's just, hey, they're different. It's cool. And it's cool.
It is cool. It is cool. And going back to what you began with, you know, about that self-alignment, if we are making our decisions from there as opposed to what so-and-so told me I had to be, mm-hmm. then it's awesome. Yeah, it's icing. Right. Yeah, icing on the cake. So I have one last question for you, and that is, what is your wildest hope for this book?
For this book? Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I would be absolutely thrilled if we could get 1 million men to read this book. That would be awesome.
Wouldn't it be awesome?
You know, and it's going to start with, you know, the people in our advanced reader team reading this book and sharing to their friends. And eventually, who knows? Maybe we'll get there. What I do believe is that all of us, man and woman in this world, need to do our own personal growth work. We need to heal our old wounds so that we can become more aligned with who we really are rather than who we think we are or who we're trying to pretend to be.
Right.
If we can do those things, then that is really what I think is going to change the world. And maybe this book will help. There's 25 chapters in this book, and you can read all of them, hopefully. But maybe there's just 1 or 2 chapters in there that will touch you in such a way that your whole life will just kind of spring alive. That would be awesome to me.
Yeah, me too. I agree. Yeah, I don't have any doubt that the energy from this putting this book together is going to continue.
I believe so.
It will ripple through and ripple through and ripple through, and yeah, I think we have some work to do going forward. Yeah, it's exciting, very exciting,
and it's going to be fun work.
Agreed. David, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate
thank you,
it.
Diana. I appreciate your being here and for inviting me, and I'm so glad that we're able to connect.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate you being in this book too. It's, what you said today and what you said in your chapter, I think will be really, really impactful for people to read and to hear. So
thank you very much.
And listeners, thank you so much for being here too. And as I say at the end of every podcast, just by being here and listening, you are kicking your own ass. So thanks so much. If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.